Good evening, Rabotai, friends, family. We're going to learn the Zera Shimshon despite the craziness that's happening out there. This should be for all those who need it. B'ezrat Hashem, all those battling against the virus should have a speedy recovery. Zera Shimshon, Parashat Va'era. We're going to do a relatively short one here today. But in the Durush Zayin, in the blue versions, he brings the pasuk. Hold on, before we get started, can you give me a Bava Metzia Gemara, if you don't mind? Bava Metzia. From here. This Hebrew one. Bava Metzia. Right here. Can you read the... Okay, never mind. Forget it. You got it? Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Good. Okay. Zera Shimshon starts off with the following pasuk. It says like this: Chavad lev Paro. Paro's heart was heavy. Right? The famous topic of Paro's heart. How did it get heavy? What does it mean that it got heavy? The Torah repeats it over and over several times throughout each makkah that it got heavy, and he made it heavy. God made it heavy. What does this mean? How are we to understand it? There's been many mifrashim on this topic, and there's really a lot of different angles, a lot of different things and points can be learned down from it. Today we're just going to learn the Zera Shimshon's perspective of how he understands this heavying or hardening or strengthening of Paro's heart. Right? There's plenty of pesukim in this week's Parashat that mention it. V'chen, it says, Ki ani hichbat li libo. Hashem says that I have made his heart heavy, etc. Question, Lama tala hakatuv hakoshi lev shel paro b'lashon kaved. He says, why does the Torah describe Paro's heart becoming hard or becoming heavy with the word kaved? Kaved literally means heavy in Hebrew. Velama, and also, b'chol pam hizkir milat lev. Why is every time the Torah says that he became stubborn, it says that he hardened his heart? What does his heart have to do with any of this? Ve'chazek lev paro, for example, it says his heart became strengthened. Ve'chazek Hashem et lev paro, or it says Hashem strengthened his heart. Furthermore, lama hisir mimenu habechira b'makot harnot. Why did Hashem? It seems like Hashem removed the free will from Paro, from making the proper decision of letting the Jewish people go, right? If you actually read the Pesukim after every plague, how Paro reacts, for example, usually, not in every single one, but usually Paro tells Moshe, okay, you got it, you guys can go pray to Hashem, you guys can go, just pray to Hashem, please, to remove the plague. And then Moshe removes the plague. And then Paro changes his mind. And the way he changes his mind, the Torah describes it as he's made his heart heavy. And it's a very slightly different, each time is written slightly differently. In the first five makot, from Dam all the way through Dever, every time it says, and Paro strengthened his heart. Paro became stubborn. Paro, the first five. On the sixth time already, it says, and Hashem strengthened his heart. So Hashem stepped in at that point and interfered with Paro's free will to that extent. Again, there's many different mifrashim on this. What does it mean? That because the general rule is God doesn't interfere with free will. Otherwise, nothing would mean anything. Otherwise, free will, reward and punishment is not proper. It doesn't make sense, right? If God made you do something, why should you be punished for it? If He made you do something, why should you even get a reward for it, right? So the general overarching rule, is that Hashem does not interfere with your free will. It lets you make every moral decision in your life. Okay? Whether you want to be a tzaddik or a rasha in every situation. However, there are some exceptions. One exception, for example, Zera Shimshon doesn't speak about it, but I'll just mention it quickly on the side. One exception is kings. Kings and world leaders. There is a pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo Melech writes, Lev melachim biyad Hashem, which means the heart of kings is in the hand of God. Right? This means that there is a certain prophecy that needs to be fulfilled. right? All of world history intertwines. All of humans' interactions and history affect each other somehow, right? And Hashem has promised us a final goal. We're talking about times of Mashiach, when Hashem is going to be revealed, right? What we call Olam Haba. That's the final goal. And for history, and all the events of history, to culminate to that final goal, Hashem needs to, from time to time, interfere with the king's decision on something. And make the king do this, or make the king do that policy, or this war, or etc., whatever it is. Meaning he controls. The kings are like puppets to that extent. Right? So you think being a king is a very prestigious, high honor, but in essence, you've just given up your free will if you become a king. And Hashem controls your major decisions. Right? That's one exception. So Paro definitely would fall into that category, because Paro was a king. So it's within the rules for God to interfere with his free will. In order to make the course of history of the exodus of Egypt and etc., everything else after that happen, which is a major event in history, God needed to play with Paro's free will, and that's technically allowed within the letter of the law. But the Zera Shimshon wants a different avenue, a different angle of how to understand this. He says the following: Madad lo midah keneged midah. Hashem did to Paro midah keneged midah, which means measure for measure. Whatever Paro did, Hashem only facilitated back to him. That's the general principle in life. And he wants to say that no, Hashem did not remove free will from Paro. He didn't remove the free will from him, which means every step he did by himself, according to this. Why? He brings you his thesis. He brings you a Pri Chadash, which is a posek. He's a halachic authority. He writes on Yoreh De'ah the following thing. Siman Mem brings over Sifat Hey. This is the language of the Pri Chadash. Katab b'Sefer Bach. That he brings in the name of the Bach. It might be the Beit Chadash. He brings Kibalti Shema'aseh Haya Shenimtza Etzem B'toch Halev Ve'echshiru Chachmei Ador. Question comes up: what happens if you shechted an animal? Talking about shlita now. Laws of kashrut. Laws of what makes an animal kosher and not kosher. What happens if you shechted an animal and you find the bone in the heart? Right? There are certain things that if you find inside the body of the animal, right, there's certain inspection needs to be done after they shecht it. Do an inspection on the major organs, lungs especially. There are certain things that if they find it, it means the animal is sick, and it means the animal is what we call a tarif. Okay, tarif means, literally, it means ripped up. Like when Yaakov found out about what happened to Yosef, or what he thought happened to Yosef, right? Yehuda showed Yaakov the bloody Joma, right? Yaakov says, Tarof Toraf Yosef. Yosef became tarif. What does it mean? It means he was ripped up by an animal, for sure. That means ripped up. So, but the term in halakha means that the animal is damaged or injured or sick, meaning one of his organs are ripped up, to the extent that that the animal cannot survive for 12 months. If the sickness is such that the animal cannot survive for 12 months, that animal is considered tarif, and it's non-kosher, 100% non-kosher. Asur doraita to eat it. Right? So now the question becomes, Pri Chadash is writing in the name of the Bach, that they shechted an animal one time. I believe this is talking about specifically a deer. A deer is kosher, by the way. They found a deer, they hunted it, they captured it, and they shechted it. And inside the deer, they found a bone in the heart. Is that something normal? Most likely not. Medically, I can tell you there's no bones in the heart. There's a lot of different tissues in there, muscle tissue, different connective tissue, but no bones. There shouldn't be, at least. Would such an animal be kosher? It says over there, the Chachamim of that time, in that area, they said it's kosher. Why? Because this is what's found in the heart of a deer. That the blood becomes hard, coagulates, and it becomes bony. It's possible maybe you could even find such a thing in domesticated animals that we eat, like cows, sheep, right? So, I have to say here, in my humble opinion, how I understand this Zera Shimshon, is not talking about where they actually found an actual bone in the heart. That will be a abnormality. That would just, for sure, that would be a problem. But what he's saying is from the language that the blood became hard, which means it congealed and coagulated, which can't happen. Perhaps he's talking about a certain clot, a blood clot in the heart. I have seen hearts. I have held organs in my hands, right? In dental school, we learned on actual, people. Like question aside, not live people, obviously. People who donated their bodies. Hopefully, no Jewish people. But the point is that I saw healthy hearts. I saw non-healthy hearts, brains, kidneys, whatever, anything you think of. So, and we saw. They also show us that the non-healthy ones. When a person dies, for example, and they donate their blood to science, if they died from a heart attack, for example, I saw such a heart. So there's a blood clot in one of the vessels in the heart that blocks the blood flow and oxygen to the heart muscle itself, and therefore the heart muscle can no longer pump because it needs the oxygen, doesn't have oxygen, can't pump, and that's how you get a heart attack. That's how a person gets a heart attack. So when there was a blood clot, so I felt the blood clot. It's very hard. It could be misunderstood for a bone, perhaps, for more primitive times, but it gets very hard. So maybe perhaps he's talking about that. I don't know. Maybe he's talking about a blood clot they found in the heart. Would that be considered kosher or not? Some blood clots, also, not every blood clot would cause a heart attack. Which is the only time it would cause a heart attack is if the artery that it's in gets completely blocked off with the hardened blood, along with other cholesterol and other fats that gets blocked up. When it gets completely blocked up and blood can no longer flow through it, that's a heart attack, right? But if there's a little space that something can still flow, the person will still be alive. They might have something called angina, which means they get whenever they do exertion, they get a little chest pain, right? That could happen. But the blood clot is still there; it's just not completely closed. So if we were to insert that into the definition of tarif, technically a person who has a beginning of a blood clot could live for quite a while. More than 12 months, even more, in an animal, until it becomes completely closed off. Then it would be considered, for sure, that's death waiting to happen. So perhaps that's what he's talking about. Let's read it that way. And in truth it says, Im kabalato kabbalah, if what the Bach or the Pri Chadash, if what they reported is true, en lilmod mimenu lish'ar minim, you can't learn out from that to other animals, which means their case was a deer. They found a deer that had this hard piece in the heart, and they thought maybe it applies also to other animals like cows. He's saying maybe you can't make that comparison. Maybe it's only by a deer. But however, he said I found in another book called Shara Shamayim, Shekatab Zera Shimshon, who wrote the following: any type of animal, they have no actual bone in their heart. This is correct, right? Physiologically, anatomically, this is correct. There's no actual physical bone in the heart. Milavad minasus, except for the horse, he says. I'm not sure, but he says except for a horse. And also one type of ox, one specific type of ox also has this bone in the heart. Because their bodies are so big, and their heart needs to be extra strong. And therefore, if an animal was shechted and it was found inside its heart, inside its heart, a bone, we have no power to make it permissible, meaning we can't say it's kosher. Unless we know this animal is that certain ox species that has normally bone in the heart. That's what this book Shara Sharaim writes. Based on this, Yesh Lomar, you can say that at first he's applying this now to Paro. At first, nitkasha damo al Yisrael kol kach bekas shenitzrar adam belibo kelev atzvi. It's possible that in the beginning, when the Makot was first happening, Paro got so angry in his anger and his hatred against the Jewish people that his heart bundled up and collected, the blood in his heart collected and bundled up, right? That's one of the ways you get a person gets a blood clot, by the way. When the blood stays in one place, when it pools in a certain place for a long time, it starts clotting. It has natural clotting factors inside the blood, natural chemicals that make it come together. Right? It needs to be there. If a person gets a cut or something, or something like that, in order to stop bleeding, those clotting factors need to come together and stop the blood. So it's a natural process that we need that got put on us. But if it happens in certain arteries, it's a big problem, right? So here, he's saying from the anger of Paro, Paro himself got angry, he chose to get angry. He used his own free will to get angry. That blood bundled and collected in his heart at first and started slowly but surely getting hard, which means congealing, hardening. V'zeh perush pasuk, and that's the explanation of the first verse, that when it first introduces Paro's heavy heart, it says, Chvad lev Paro. Paro's heart was heavying, getting heavy. That's why he refused to send the Jewish people out. And when Hashem saw that in his own anger the blood started bundling in his heart, then Hashem continued that process, made it stronger in his heart, until it became like a complete clot. A complete hardening of his heart, which means he's completely reinterpreting the whole idea of Hashem, of Paro hardening his heart. He's saying, Davka, it means, when the Torah says hardening his heart, it means there was a clot forming in his heart. And Hashem made it fully formed towards the end. That's what it means in the verse when it says, Ki b'pa'am hazot ani sholech et kol megufotai al libecha. This time I am sending to you, Paro, all of my plagues against you, to your heart. Sending them to your heart, it says in the pasuk. El libecha. Rashi explained this verse. This verse, by the way, is in the context of the 7th Makkah, Barad. Right before Barad happened, the fire hail, Hashem tells Moshe to relay this message to Paro, to tell him this pasuk. That this time I'm sending all of my plagues to your heart. Rashi explained in this verse the following. Lamadnu, we learn from this, shemakat bechorot shekula keneged kol makot. That the Makkah, the plague of bechorot, which is the 10th plague, firstborns dying, was equal to all the rest of the makot. Now, everybody jumps in this Rashi and they don't understand what he's talking about. Because again, this verse was said by Moshe to Paro right before the 7th plague of Barad. If that's the case, why is Rashi commenting here? We learn from here that the 10th plague of the firstborns dying was equal to the rest of the plagues. Where does the 10th plague have to do with this? We didn't get there yet. We're talking about Barad. Now, in truth, there are different textual versions of this Rashi. Art scroll on the Rashi art scroll on this pasuk. The verse is Shemot 9:14. If you want to look over there, art scroll on the note over there. They bring you all different shitot. It's there's different versions of this Rashi. That maybe he didn't mean bechorot, rather he meant bakurot, which means the first crops, and that would make sense. That would fit with the 7th plague because the Barad, the hail, destroyed all the crops outside, all the crops. So that's one way to read it. There's other opinions, but it seems Zera Shimshon is sticking with the plain and simple bechorot, which means firstborn. If that's the case, what does the firstborn have to do with this at all? Well, he answers the following. He says, according to our way, how we understood it, meduyak shapir. Everything makes sense. Why? El libecha. The verse says, I'm sending all of my plagues to your heart. What does that mean? She'emid lo etzem toch libo. Means, as the Zera Shimshon is positing here, that he established a bone, which means like a clot, in my opinion, a hardening of the blood in his heart. Uvazeh nitraf, and because of this, he's becoming taref. Paro is becoming taref. What do we say is the definition of taref? A person or an animal is not going to live, who is not going to live for more than 12 months. That's taref. And Hashem put this blood clot in his heart. It got so severe that he wasn't going to make it. That Paro could not have lived another 12 months, and he got the status of what we call taref. מה שלא היה כן, מתחילה שלא היה רק נצרר הדם, which wasn't the case at first, because at first it was just starting to clot when he was getting angry, but Hashem went ahead and brought it to that final stage that would not allow him to live out the next 12 months. Like we explained, and since now Paro got the status of tarif, who besakana lamut, he might die. He has a high chance of dying now. וכיוון שהכתוב כתב במכה זו, and since the verse wrote in this about this plague, the seventh plague, et kol megefotai, that Hashem is sending all of his plagues to the heart of Paro. The mashma, it sounds like it's saying shehi shekula keneged kol hamakot. That means this one is equal to the rest of them. How is it equal to the rest of them? In what sense? V'hainu lefi she'ata nitraf v'ya b'sechet mita. מכל שכן, all the more so, מכת בכורות שהייתה שעת מיתה, ממש שבוודאי היא שקולה כנגד כל המכות. So he explains Rashi the following way, that since now he was considered tarif, Paro was considered tarif, and therefore he was basically on the verge of dying, and by the makah of Bechorot, the 10th makah, they weren't basically on the verge of dying, they were actually dying. All the firstborns, right? So that's more stringent. So if by the seventh Makkah, where Hashem is saying, I'm sending all of my plagues to you, and all he really did there, according to Zera Shimshon's interpretation, is that he gave him a blood clot that makes him taref, that puts him on the way of dying, and over there God still says, I'm sending all my plagues, and all the more so when they were actually dying, that's equal to all the plagues. That's his logical step here. And that's why Rashi commented, that by the 10th plague, that's how we learn from this, that we learn from this pasuk by the 7th plague, that by the 10th plague, when they were actually dying, for sure it's equal to all the 10. All the other, severity of all the other plagues. That's a technicality. V'af shelich ora hu davar pashut, even though this might be obvious, ve'en shayach limud al zeh, I don't need to be taught this, it's obvious. The pshita she'en davar kashe me'amavet. Because I understand there's nothing more serious than death, right? I understand there's nothing more serious than death. So why do you have to go ahead and tell me that the 10th plague was equal to the rest of them because there was actual death there? The rest of them wasn't death. The 10th one was actually death. So obviously I understand that. So Rashi, why are you telling me the 10th plague is equal to death? Obviously they're dying there. It's equal to the rest of them. Nevertheless, למדנו שמכת ברכות שוקלה וכולי, משום דאיכא סברה נמי להפך. He says Rashi had to tell you this fact that we learn from here that the 10th plague where there's actual death is equal to the rest of them because there was no death there. Even though you might say, well, obviously because there's actual death is more stringent than anything. However, there is an opinion in the Gemara that no, death is not the worst. There's something else worse than death. And that opinion in the Gemara is based in a story, a very interesting story, a long story, in Masechet Bava Metziah, page 86a. I'm going to read you the story, not the whole thing, just the point that is the point that applies to us. So we understand what Rashi was trying to show you that he disagrees with, because there's an opinion that says in this story that there's something worse than death. So I'll tell you the context of the story, and you can judge for yourself. It says, Masechet Bava Metziah, very interesting story, the following. Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, Ishta'ili Rav Hama bar Barated Hasa. I was told a certain story by this Chacham. And this is the story, he says. Rabbi Bar Nachmani was one of the biggest Chachamim in the Gemara. Rabbah, he's the Rabbah that we always mention. Agav Shemada Nachnafshe. Because of the persecution that was happening to the Jewish people, he died. How did he die? The story I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you the part that he actually dies, it's a long story. But there's a very interesting build-up to that point. Look what it says over here. Ichlu be'korza. The government was speaking bad about Rabbah. They knew he was troubling them. How? Be'malka. How? Amru, they said, Ika had gavra, there's a certain Jewish guy. Behuda amongst the Jews. Deka mevatel teresar alfe gavrem Israel Yarha bekayeta, yarha bestava. He is preventing us from collecting a lot of taxes from the Jews. 1 month in the spring and 1 month in the fall. What is this? Rashi explains. Rashi explains that Rabbah had a huge yeshiva, and all the Jews would come to him a month before the major holidays of Pesach and before the holidays in Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. They would come to him and he would give a 1 month shi'ur, 1 month long crash course explaining all the halachot of what they should be expecting, what they should do. And because of that, they weren't home. They were away in yeshiva for a month. And since they weren't home, they weren't able to pay the taxes. Meaning when the government send their people to collect taxes, they go door to door. There was no one home. A lot of people, they missed out a lot of money because of Rabbah. The kingship, the kingdom, sent a certain messenger, the Malka, Batre, to find Rabbah. They sent him after Rabbah. Bring him to justice. V'lo ishkacheh. And he couldn't find him. Arak v'azal bepumpadita la'akra la'agma u'me'agma l'shchin u'mishchin l'tzrifa u'mitzrifa le'ayna ena damim u'mena damim lepumpadita. Rabbah is jumping around from city to city. He went from all these different cities. Jumped from here to here, there to there. 6 different cities and came back to Pumpadita, which is the main city in Babel. Meaning he's running away from the messenger. Every time he gets there, he can't find him because the Rabbah already left. Every time he gets to the next city, Rabbah already left. Bepumpadita ashkache. But in Pumpadita, he found him. How? Ikla pristaka de malkal leha ushpiza de Rabbah. Rabbah was staying by a certain inn, hotel, motel, whatever you want to call it. And that messenger of the king was looking for him, came there too, to the same hotel. Now, the way the story reads, it seems that Rabbah saw him. Rabbah knew that he was there, but he didn't know Rabbah was there. Karivu tacha kameh. This part is a little bit hard to understand, but let's just read it. Karivu tacha kameh. They served the tray in front of that messenger, the king's messenger, tray of food. Vashkuhu trekase. V'dilyuha letacha. And they gave him 2 cups to drink. And they placed the tray down, mekameh, in front of him. What happened because of this? Hadar partzufe la'achore. Something out of a horror movie. The guy's face, it says, turned backwards, 180 degrees. Something wicked happened. Why? Rashi explains. Because they served him 2 cups. At that time, there were certain spiritual energies, negative spiritual energies, call them demons, call them whatever you want to call them, that had more power than they do today. And there's a concept, the Gemara Masechet Pesachim talks about it for a long time, called zugot. Zugot means pairs. It really means twos, evens, twos. For some reason, without getting into it now, if somebody does something in pairs, the demons have more power on him to affect him and to damage him. So they served him 2 cups. That's a pair. It's an even number. The pshat is what? But when it comes to odd numbers, they have no power. Why? The pshat is because odd numbers is always connected more to a single god, to the idea of monotheism, because there's always a one odd man out. When you have an odd number, you could 3, for example, 7, right? There's 3 pairs and there's 1 sticking out. There's always one set aside from all the pairs. But pairs, it almost looks like you're hinting to the fact that there could be even powers in the world. Chas v'shalom, more than one god that have even power. So that's why the demons attack a person like that. They're able to attack a person like that. But if you do odds, they don't have power over you because that's more connected to monotheism, that Hashem is one. Again, there's a lot of very deep esoteric concepts. But the point is here that this messenger of the king, his face was turned backwards, like 180. I don't know, someone cracked his neck or something. I don't know what happened. But he was stuck. He was stuck in this way. Amrule, now they came to Rabbah. They said, Rabbah, Mayna Avid le. What are we going to do with this guy? Gavrada Makahu, he's a person of the king. You're going to send him back to the king like this? What are we going to do? Amalahu, Rabbah said, I'll tell you what to do. Karibu Tachalakame, bring the tray in front of him. Ve'ashkuyuhu hadkasa, and gave him, place 1 cup to drink. Reverse it. Place 1 cup. And then place down the tray. I don't know what the tray has to do with this bichlal. I have to look in the commentaries. There's something about serving the tray, placing it down. I don't know. This needs further analysis. But just to bring out the point that we want to bring out to our Zera Shimshon. And then if you do that, says Rabbi, he's going to be healed. Abdul lehachi, they did this. They brought the 1 tray, placed the 1 cup down, placed the tray down. And he got automatically healed and back to normal. Amar, so now this messenger of the king says, Meda yadana, I know for sure the gavrada kav ba'ena, that the person I am searching for, hacha, he's here, hachahu. Bachisha batre, he searched after him eventually because he knew only Rabbi had the power to do that. Chacham on that level had the power to fix him like that. So he figured out he was there in his close vicinity. He found him. He found Rabbi. Remember, he was searching for him for a very long time. Several cities, back and forth. Amar, he said, Azlina meha, I'm going to leave you here. Because you helped me, you're off the hook with me. Even if the king and his people are going to kill me and threaten to kill me and kill me, I won't tell them where you are. Says the messenger. I won't tell them where you are. But if they start torturing me, however, beating me up, torturing me to tell them where you are, maglina, then I'd have to reveal where you are. The story continues, but the point here we see is that from the perspective of this guy, messenger of the king, torture was worse than death. Torture was worse than death. Compare that now back to our Parashat, Va'era, the 10 makot. The first 9 makot were torture. Torture, complete, terrible. And the 10th one was only death. So Rashi's point was trying to show you that the 10th one where there's death, it's equal to the rest of them, which means death is still worse than torture in Rashi's opinion. That's why he commented what he commented, to teach you that point, that death is still worse than torture, to show that he disagrees with this point in the Gemara, that torture is worse than death. Beseder. And that's what it means. Vayichbad libo hu ve'amadav ve'chazak lev par'o. That's what it means when Hashem said, when the pasuk says that Hashem hardened Paro's heart, damam, that their blood, and not only Paro, also his servants, that their blood in their heart, bekirbam mehammat hasin'ah v'akas, it first started bundling up in their heart because of their hatred and anger. V'chein ki anich bati et libo, and then when it says that I hardened his heart, Hashem, ve'et lev avadav, and the heart of his servants, leman shetiot utai ele bekirbo. The verse says there, in order to place my signs in him, in him, davka, he says this is davka, which means specifically God did it in him. By what? According to this explanation, that he made his heart actually have a bone or a clot, as we're understanding, in there, and made him taref like this.
His bone was hard in him.
Furthermore, Ate Shapir, it all makes sense. She'achar she'amar asher it'alalti b'Mitzrayim, דהיינו המכות, חזר ואמר ואת אותותיי אשר שמתי בם. ולכן, בעת המכת בכורות, אמר פרעה, וברכתם גם אותי. That's why when Paro, at the very end, after the 10th plague, Paro said to Moshe, you guys can go, וברכתם גם אותי, also bless me, bless me. What happened to Paro? He didn't get at that point, all the makot should have been done, but he wasn't a firstborn. Well, he was, but he didn't die. So why is he saying, bless me also? Right? All the other makot were already done. He wasn't suffering anything. What was he suffering? What does he need a blessing for? התפללו עליי, according to Zera Shimshon, he wants to say it means that he was asking Moshe and Aaron to pray for him, שארפא ממכת לבבי, that I should be healed from my heart condition. What was that condition? The hardening, the clot. דומיד אברהם שהתפלל על אבימלך, just like when Avimelech, right, way before, when Avimelech took Sarah, and then Hashem made Avimelech and all the people in his castle have a certain problem. What was the problem? All their holes in their body got cut off, so that he wouldn't be able to make any sin with Sarah. And after Avimelech gave her back and blessed Abraham, he said, Abraham, please pray for me also. What was he praying for? So that he should heal. He should get healed. Same thing Paro here was asking Moshe and Aaron to pray to Hashem so that he should be healed of his heart ailment. It says also, it says by the 10th plague, the Egyptians said, we are all dying. This verse needs explanation. It says, they weren't all dying, only the firstborns were dying. Moshe said only the firstborns were going to die, not all of them. If you want to say that it's like the Chachamim said, like Rashi brought down, that they saw that if there was no firstborn in the house, then the oldest person in the house died, which means every place had somebody who was dying. So maybe that's what it means when it says we're all dying. On the contrary, it says Zera Shimshon, Mishum re'aya shelo yamutu kulam shelo met el gadol habayit. Still, bottom line, there's a proof that's not showing that everybody died. Only one person died per house, or several, not everybody. The verse says everybody. So how do you explain that? Furthermore, if they saw that what Moshe said technically did not fully happen, because Moshe's prophecy is that only the firstborns are going to die. But in truth, what happened was that if there was no firstborn in the house, the oldest person in the house died even though it wasn't firstborn. Which means that's not technically what Moshe said. Moshe said only firstborns. But now there's other people who are not firstborns who are also dying. So maybe they would challenge Moshe's prophecy on that. They should have said, they should have challenged Moshe's prophecy. And rather, Badai, says Zera Shimshon, they knew that they were taref. How were they taref? Meaning, taref means they were on the verge of dying. Why? Because of what Hashem made to all their hearts. He hardened all their hearts, which means He put clots in their hearts, which means they're taref. They're on the way to getting a myocardial infarction, as we say, which means MI, which means a technical term for a heart attack. Myocardial infarction. That's the technical medical term. But the point is, since they were all getting there, that makes sense of the pasuk when it says "Kulanu metim." They're all dying, which means they're all on the verge of dying. וכשראו שמתו אף מאותם שאינם בכורות, היו סבורים שהמכה שהייתה בליבם גרמה מיתתם, ולכן אמרו כולנו מתים. And once they saw that people who were not firstborns were dying, they thought that it must be because of the heart condition that we have now. It seems this is only talking about Hashem and His servants, because the verse says that Hashem hardened the heart of, Paro and his servants, because the verse says that Hashem only hardened the heart of Paro ve'abadav and his servants. It doesn't say of all Mitzrayim that He hardened all their hearts. It says only Paro and his servants. So this must be who he's talking about now. That's what it means when the prophet Yeshaya says, "Velevav Mitzrayim yimas bekirbo," and the hearts of Egypt will melt inside them. It means that Hashem was making them terefa, like we said. V'negev Hashem et Mitzrayim naguf verafo. And the plague of Hashem in Egypt was afflicting and healed. Why? The nagafam, because at first He plagued them with this heart condition for all of them. And after that, B'tzat Israel, Mitzrayim, after Israel left from Egypt, Rifa'am, Hashem healed this heart problem in all of Egypt, because otherwise they would all died very, very soon from, heart disease. So that's why Hashem had to do that at the end of the day. That's the Zera Shimshon for this week. Big chidush and how you understand the hardening of the heart. Something for us to think about. Baruch Hashem. Everyone, like I said, this drasha should have been for the Refuah Shlema of Kol Chulei Amo Yisrael who need it at this very dire time. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.